Hi people, today I am cosplaying as Pudding from Whole Cake Island, Big Mom's daughter. My third eye is a bit lopsided. She's a bit dull, but it's my first time doing an eye, so be kind to me, okay? But I didn't do a video for Zoe because if we're being real, it was just Oda's Hear Me Out arc. But for today's video, you may need some context from it. Towards the end of the arc, Capone Beije, I honestly don't know how you say his name, but one of the 12 rookies we met in Sabati kidnapped Sanji for the Big Mom Pirates. He's taken to Whole Cake Island for an arranged marriage with Big Mom's daughter, Pudding. Me! Actually, on second thought, I'm cosplaying as Sanji's fiance. I regret everything. But nicknamed the Sanji retrieval team, the Straw Hats, along with some of their friends we met on Zoe, like Pedro and Carrot, set out to Whole Cake Island. While there, we learned that this arranged marriage is a part of a political alliance with Sanji's former family, the Vinsmoke family, or the Germa 66. The Straw Hats form their own political alliance as well, involving themselves in a plot to assassinate the Yonko Big Mom. Very big feat. But this arc, in terms of politics, sparks a few conversations that have been touched on a little bit throughout One Piece, but have never been the main focus until now. They're both very social issues and not so much about, revolutionary politics or colonialism or anything like that, but instead liberalism and Big Mom's performative quest for equality and Sanji grappling with the definition of masculinity. Performative liberalism surrounds this entire story with the Marines' quest for justice and the constant virtue signaling of elites to pretend as if their quest for justice and their militarism is appropriate, when in reality it is brutal and it is violent and it often involves political violence against poor working people to uphold the status of the elites. Sanji's story, as well as the other men around him, has been laced with the dynamics of growing up without a father figure or not meeting the standard of masculinity, something I think we could do a deep dive into once I finish covering all of the arcs that have been released. This arc is the first to explicitly comment on these two topics, so I want to discuss the harm of liberalism, as well as toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, and gender performity. But before we get into any of that, I would like you guys to subscribe as always. I have TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, Discord. On Patreon, I make exclusive content that shows my process of how I make videos just like this from start to finish. So if you want to be able to see, you'd be the first to know when I do a One Piece video or any other video, that's a good place to see it and see how it develops. The Sanji retrieval team arrived on one of the islands in the Toto Kingdom, Cacao Island, which is entirely made from chocolate. While Luffy was stuffing his mouth, Becomes, one of our friends from Zoe and a former Big Mom pirate, told the rest of the team about how Whole Cake Island was a nation where all races lived in harmony. Big Mom wanted to create a nation with every race in the world, the dream influenced by her adoptive mom, Mother Carmel. Her islands consist of merfolk, humans, fishmen, 3 eyes, long legs, long arms, just to name a few. She has 85 children in total, which is crazy. A lot of whom are of mixed race. Sanji's fiance in the arc, me, Pudding, for example, is mixed with 3 eyes. The island also consists of homies or sentient objects that are granted a soul through Big Mom's devil fruit. She also has a hobby of collecting strange creatures, like whenever she kidnapped Brooke. The one race that doesn't inhabit the island is the Giants, who despise Big Mom after she wreaked havoc in Elbaf as a young child. So she instead employs Caesar to artificially create giants, which in the Punk Hazard arc we learn is practically impossible. In classic One Piece fashion though, Big Mom's Toto Island is very authoritarian, despite the aesthetic of inclusion. People of the island must offer their lifespan every 6 months as a fee for Big Mom's protection, and if they refuse, there is a death penalty as a consequence. She wants the aesthetics of equality or inclusion, but doesn't actually value those people they're purely a pawn. In fact, a lot of times her children have historically experienced a lot of bullying and hatred simply for being different, which she does not really protect them against or enshrine any sort of social cohesion that prevents stuff like that from happening, any laws, none of that. It's all for aesthetics. Now, I've covered different aspects of liberalism a lot on this channel. In fact, I just discussed it in my last video when talking about Zoran, so I'll make sure to keep it brief. But social liberalism is often used in Western countries like America to distract from the lack of other amenities like healthcare, good infrastructure, and better wages. That's not to say social progress is unnecessary or purely a distraction. Obviously, it's the reason I can go to the school I go to, it's the reason I can live where I want to. Obviously, as a black person, girl, we love social progress. But rather, I'm trying to say that it is used by neoliberal governments to signal progress, all while keeping people poor and not improving their material conditions. Wouldn't it be great if we had both? Instead of those same politicians saying we can't improve your healthcare and wages, it would be too costly. A lot of Americans drink the Kool-Aid and resort to pinkwashing when discussing things like China or Palestine. They signal that America and other Western countries are superior because we have gay marriage, and places like Palestine and China are backwards and barbaric because they aren't at the same level of social progress. Gay marriage does not make America a progressive safe haven, especially when those same gay and trans people are in poverty at higher rates, and no party is invested in bringing them or anyone else out of said poverty. Similarly to Big Mom, neoliberals like the aesthetic of inclusion, but very rarely will fight to protect those rights, and their inaction will a lot of the time put those rights in harm's way. Like, for example, the Democrats' inaction for the past few years, which has allowed for Donald Trump's admin to get into power and propose rolling back gay marriage, which from my understanding happened recently where it was challenged in the courts, as well as successfully roll back Roe v. Wade and affirmative action while the dude wasn't even president. But like I said, we're gonna keep it cute, we're gonna keep it brief. That's all for that. I've made several videos on liberalism if you want to check it out. Now we can get to the meat and potatoes of what I really want to cover, which is masculinity and how Oda portrays manhood and talks about this, has this conversation around gender through Sanji. Now, while I despise him as a character, as you know, I am the #1 Sanji hater, I have to admit that Oda's exploration of masculinity through Sanji in Whole Cake was wonderful. I do regard this arc as Sanji propaganda, but it was excellent nonetheless. I actually want to do a whole video on how One Piece explores manhood because there's a lot of commentary outside of even just Sanji. A lot of characters in One Piece don't have fathers and struggle with, you know, having role models in their lives like Ace, or just struggle in general with mental illness. And I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of gender and manhood and all of that. But I'll do that once I've covered all of the arcs that are fully released. Sanji's entire existence, even beyond this arc, has been this toil with the definition of masculinity and what is a valid expression of it. As we talked about in my chaotic video, patriarchy is often about the competition between men. It honestly has more to do with men than it does to do with men and women. A lot of times that competition is about who performs the gender of male, or the gender of a man better, who's more macho. We see Sanji do this with Zoro a lot. They have this playful hatred towards each other and often compete to see who was stronger. I've talked previously about Sanji's time on Momoiro Island and how he was kind of transphobic when talking about the locals even after his time there, even though they took the time to train him. He saw presenting as feminine as a stripping of his manhood, that he and anyone who entertained such a thing were less than simply for playing with gender roles and gender performity, and by virtue is just kind of misogynistic, because he has this view as if, because of his past trauma, which we'll get into, he kind of has this view that being feminine is kind of less than, but we'll get into it. But at the end of his trip there, he literally caved and he put on the dress, and that's why I maintain the theory. I pioneered the theory. I don't know if I pioneered it. I'm sure other people have talked about it. But I maintain the theory that Sanji is trans, because I have never seen the dude more happy in my life. I looked at him at the end of that arc where he was sitting on the rock or whatever. He had the dress on, the makeup on. I was like, girl, you are trans. I just felt it in my soul, but maybe I'm the only one. I don't know. But even if he isn't trans, that was a profound moment of Oda showcasing Sanji's rigid view of gender, toxic masculinity, and ultimately a moment of growth at the end of his trip. Even if it was brief and he was back to being transphobic once he got to Fishman Island. These negative feelings that Sanji has developed towards expressing femininity are not out of thin air. Whole Cake Island is Oda's way of connecting the cause to the effect. When Sanji was growing up in the Germa kingdom, the rigid idea of masculinity was ingrained into not only him, but his siblings. His father, Vince Smoke Judge, wanted to genetically enhance all of his children before they were born, so they would have superhuman abilities and zero emotions, thus transforming them into perfect soldiers. Their mother was against the practice and took a drug to prevent this from happening, but she was only successful during her pregnancy with Sanji. But because of this, Sanji grew up completely different and isolated from his siblings. All of the children would train to become the head of Germa's military arm, but Sanji always fell behind in these exercises. Because of this, his siblings would bully and beat him for being weak and a crybaby. His own father even had a great disdain for his weaknesses. When Judge came to the realization that Sanji would never catch up to his siblings, he erased his existence. He locked him away under the palace and staged a funeral, and Sanji had to wear an iron mask that was only taken off whenever he would eat. His brothers discovered he was still alive and would come down just to continue bullying him. Sanji's relationship with his mother, Sora, is a important context when framing his ties to femininity and his differences. The drug she took during her pregnancy greatly sacrificed her health and left her bedridden. But while she was still alive, Sanji prepared his first meal ever, which is a very consequential, as we say, a canon event in his life. It was ruined on his way to delivering it, but the effort he put in made her smile, and she decided she would only eat meals he prepared, which sparked his interest in cooking. This interest expanded oddly enough when he was imprisoned. He was given a cookbook where he read all about the all blue and continued to practice cooking. And this is where he obviously developed his desire and ultimate dream of exploring the all blue. His sister Reiju would come down to help with his injuries. It's not without notice that all the people that were nice to him in his childhood were women, and I don't think that's by accident. I don't think that's a inconsequential thing. I think that is Oda, if we are to go with this idea of masculinity and femininity and the black and white portrayal that it had during Sanji's childhood, I think it's definitely more so metaphorical than it is like a woman good, man bad. I think it's more so metaphorical in terms of femininity and masculinity. The German kingdom had just crossed the red line into the East Blue when Sanji declared to Reiju that he wanted to run away and become a chef. She broke open his cell, allowing him to escape, but he was caught by his father, who was actually chill about him leaving so long as he didn't tell anyone that they were related. So he agreed, and Reiju directed him to the Orbit cruise ship where he would eventually do child labor as a chef, and the rest is history. When Sanji is forced to confront his family during this arranged marriage on Whole Cake Island, he wrestles with the trauma he was subjected to and the ideals he still holds on to. He has to grapple with seeing his abusive family again and confronting a neglectful father figure he still seeks the approval of. When they fight and interact, there's almost like this childlike yearning for Judge to view Sanji as finally worthy. I mean, Sanji has obviously gotten stronger, he has a huge bounty, he's obviously demonstrated his strength regardless of not being genetically modified, but he still awaits approval from this guy who doesn't love him instead of accepting himself. He enters a bit of an incel arc after realizing his fiancée, Pudding, Me, is also just using him like his family. Even as he marries her, he has to fight the lust he feels for her, knowing she plans to assassinate both him and his family. Pudding and him do eventually end up growing close, though, because they have very similar backstories. They are two people who were ousted by their families because of their differences and seek approval and love. The difference, I would say, between Pudding and Sanji, though, is that Sanji has had a lot of people in his life who have shown him love. Zeph, Luffy, and the other Straw Hats have all accepted him. Luffy even goes as far to go on a hunger strike until Sanji comes back, which is definitely a callback to obviously his mom whenever he was younger, refusing to eat anything but what Sanji cooked. Luffy's actions throughout this entire arc make him almost a foil to Judge in a similar way that his mom Sora, or Sanji's mom Sora, was. Judge literally asks why he went out his way to rescue Sanji. He can't comprehend such a selfless act, especially for someone as weak as Sanji or whatever. But Luffy simply presents a different type of masculinity that isn't purely defined by competition and physical strength, but also by protecting those he loves. But I completely can identify and understand that feeling of worthlessness, even when there are so many people and events in your life that have shown that you are worth something. That is something I struggle with literally every day. So even though me and Sanji are number one foes, we can identify with that, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to build bridges here. I'm trying my best. This might be a far out theory, but I interpret Sanji's love of cooking as a metaphorical tie to femininity, which you could say is because cooking is, traditionally, whenever we're thinking about gender roles, a woman thing. But that's not even why I would say that. I would simply say that because it's something his mom loved him to do. It is his way of showing love and care for those around him. What Sanji doesn't realize is that although he has feminine qualities, that doesn't make him less of a man. If he does drag while on Momoiro Island, that doesn't have to be an emasculating experience. It's only emasculating because he's uncomfortable with himself and not secure in his masculinity. I think a big reason I don't like Sanji is because he is so insecure throughout the show in his masculinity, and it reminds me a lot of insecure men you see online or that I've just, met in real life. I wouldn't say he's as unbearable as Red Pillars, but he does engage sometimes in attacks towards trans people or necessarily competes in a similar way to his dad, and it just comes across a bit yucky to me, if that makes sense. A big reason I regard Whole Cake Island as propaganda is that it attempts to paint Sanji as a gentleman whenever he has never been presented that way before. All of his advances regarding helping women are most of the time self-indulgent or to serve himself. He really only interacts with women to sexualize or lust after them, presents it as romantic, and as I discussed earlier, he a lot of times views femininity as a weakness if one adopts it, if he adopts it, if other people adopt it, which is just, like I said, misogyny, but in a different lens or in a different style. He has this style of misogyny that is closer to a Discord mod, like a McQueen, tips fedora type of misogyny. If he presents himself as a gentleman, as or a romantic person, he can, charm his way into bed with someone, It's this performative gentleman behavior that is not sincere. It's kind of like the entire lesson of Whole Cake Island when we're talking about masculinity and accepting different parts of yourself, accepting feminine aspects of yourself and masculine parts of yourself, is kind of the reason I don't like him. Interesting. I suppose this is Oda's way of saying Sanji is growing. He's not at the same level of security as Luffy, who I would say obviously has a more healthy version of masculinity where, like I said, he does care about strength, but he only cares about strength not for the aesthetics of it or for what he thinks it represents, but rather because if he's stronger, he can protect the people he loves. That's the only reason it matters to him. It's not to be macho or anything like that. He does not care about that. It has no function for him if it isn't about protecting the people that he cares about. So obviously Sanji is not at that same level, and Oda, I wouldn't say is trying to say he is, but perhaps this is a breaking point for him. Perhaps that's what Whole Cake Island is supposed to be. I don't know. But as always, I like to give a cute little review. It's honestly been a while since I've watched Whole Cake Island, and I didn't write down any notes like a dummy. Didn't write down any notes about what I liked about it, but I do remember it being a fun arc, and I liked the wedding assassination scene and the planning with BJ beforehand. I remember Luffy's like tough guy act when negotiating was really funny whenever they're all like sitting in that room. The wedding was very like Red Wedding from Game of Thrones type of vibe. You know, everybody's trying to assassinate everybody, although no one succeeds, so it's not really like that in that way. But Big Mom is trying to assassinate the Vinsmokes, and then BJ wants to assassinate Big Mom, and then the Straw Hats are in on it. It's a lot. The chaos of the wedding was amazing, with Luffy falling from the cake. It was high tier drama, high tier camp, and the anticipation for how it would go was really well paced. Now it's time to talk about my man. Oh my god, you gotta keep something to fuel you, you know? You gotta keep something that keeps the spirits high. And a fine man will always keep my spirits high, girl. If I get that opportunity to talk about Katakuri, King, my spirits are lifted, girl. They're not even real, but my spirits are lifted high as the heavens. Katakuri is fine as hell. He has a lot of depth to him, similarly to King, in a way you wouldn't expect from a supporting character in an anime. He has a lot of loyalty to his family, and also has some insecurity regarding his appearance. He defended his sister from being bullied, which was really sweet, but also felt like he had to be perfect after that and never let his guard down. It's a really sweet moment when he loses to Luffy and his sister Brule tells him it's okay to not be perfect. Like I said, we get a lot of depth from characters in One Piece, but I just feel like that's pretty profound depth for a supporting character, to see like that interaction between them and their family, and just a really sweet moment. It was really nice. I've described this before, but I think what Oda does best with characters is not only what he did with Sanji, which is using the character as a vehicle to explore different topics and different messages that he wants to convey through his art. I think that's a great way to use a character, is what he did with Sanji in this arc. But also, I like that he makes his characters morally ambiguous, especially his enemies are always pretty morally ambiguous for the most part, unless we're talking about like Doflamingo, who's very obviously straightforwardly evil. We recognize Katakuri as Luffy's opponent, but there are a lot of forces and events in his life that have led him to this moment. Katakuri mainly fights Luffy because he's loyal to his mother, despite him being expendable to her. If it weren't for, the circumstances that they are in, it's very obvious that Katakuri has a lot of respect for Luffy's determination. And I think it's a nice lesson to teach people. Not only does it make the characters more believable, but it's also just a nice lesson to remember that people are redeemable or more complex than how they're presented at face value. Like, Katakuri is very easily someone who could become an ally of Luffy's later on. Like, I could totally see that because of the amount of respect he has, and because he honestly just seems like a pretty sweet guy, especially when we look at how he treats his family. And I think that can definitely be applied to people in real life who, we may not agree with their worldview entirely, but that doesn't mean that they're irredeemable. They are still morally ambiguous, just like Katakuri, and can be taught or can be convinced to see a different perspective of the world that may favor them, even though they may not realize it, because Katakuri obviously doesn't realize that his allegiance to Big Mom is probably to his detriment, honestly. He's just doing it out of pure loyalty because that's probably what he's been taught to do since he was young, is to be loyal to his mom and to be a soldier for his mom, which he, would eventually grow up to be. So I just think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from him. But like I said, like, that's crazy depth for a character that we haven't seen since and didn't see before then. Like, that's crazy, isn't it? I was really looking forward to their fight because I'd seen clips beforehand. The environment of the mirror world was very dynamic and well designed. It was pretty awesome. I understand why people thought that Luffy didn't really win the fight against Katakuri though, because it was a bit of a convenient victory if we're being real. Like, they both downed each other. Luffy was crawling on the ground and then Katakuri was standing up, a little woozy, but he was standing up and then he just fell. It was a bit convenient. It was really sweet that Luffy put the hat on Katakuri's mouth since he knows he's insecure about it. Shows that the respect was mutual for both of them. And now to address what I said in my community post I was going to address in this video. Sanji fans are annoying. Since the beginning of this year, there's been a claim that Toei is biased against Sanji, which I wanted to address. Sanji fans have accused Toei of making him look weaker in more recent arcs, especially in comparison to Zoro. One user on Twitter even went so far as to complain about how slow he was running in Egghead, which I thought was a bit ridiculous, but I think further acknowledgement, I feel like accounts like that are definitely just rage baiting to farm engagement, and it's probably all that most of it is, but I do think that there are definitely fans out there that are like rioting for Sanji, glazing them. Honestly, every month or so I see someone complaining about how Sanji is portrayed in the anime, and it always has this sense of like arrogance and entitlement, and honestly on the internet is so like I said, it is so hard to discern what is intentional rage bait and what is like actual criticism that people think that they're cooking up. I don't think people understand how animes are made and expect them to be exact replicas to the manga. You have to keep in mind that this is an adaptation, which means animators and directors are at liberty to change minor things to fit whatever narrative they want to convey. So if they think it's more impactful for Sanji to get hit in a scene where he originally didn't, then they're at liberty to change that. People are pointing this out specifically for Sanji, but I guarantee you this happens for literally most characters in One Piece, probably even including Luffy. It's just the dynamics of an anime adaptation. And you have to ask yourself why Toei would have a specific grudge against Sanji. Like, how would that benefit them in any way? This is a soulless, if we're being real, this is a soulless corporation with a focus on making a profitable anime. I do not think that they have huge takes like me on Sanji or Zoro. Like, I don't think they're, that's too much inside baseball. I don't think they care, girl. I think people have a lot of criticism towards Toei sometimes, but they may not understand how things work. And so they're just kind of spitting up stuff, but they have no understanding of how the industry works and how the pipeline works, and it can make their takes, especially since I'm an animation student, it makes their takes even more ridiculous sometimes. So it's a bit frustrating for me. But that's all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this One Piece's political episode. Next time will be a very special Wano episode that I'm cooking up. That'll be pretty epic because Wano is probably like my second favorite arc in all of One Piece, so I'm very excited for that. There's a lot of politics to talk about there. I don't know if I should split it up into 2 videos or just have one big mega video. I'm trying to figure out how to format it, but yeah, I got a cute little situation I'm cooking up, so I'll see you then. But for now, I'd like to thank my Patreon members, my $7, my $3, my $1, and I would like to thank my YouTube members, of course, and I would like to thank all of you for watching this video, because sometimes we'll be out here struggling, girls. So anyone who is willing to watch me, I really do appreciate it. But yeah, I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.